Could this actually be the flood tunnel that's causing our problems? I don't know. That's what we're here to find out, because we could be that close to the treasure.
We have spent a lot of time to try to follow the gold and silver. If there's gold in that void, that'd be huge.
Buried beneath centuries of mystery, the truth has finally surfaced. Gold has been found in Oak Island's money pit. After years of dead ends, setbacks, and whispers of lost riches, the latest discovery has sent shockwaves through the team. Traces of real gold have been detected in the underground water, proving once and for all that treasure is hidden deep beneath the island. Tune in as the final layers of earth are pulled away, revealing what has been buried for centuries. The hunt for Oak Island's hidden treasure. Deep in the North Atlantic, on a little island called Oak Island, people have been searching for treasure for more than 2 centuries. It's a place full of mystery, secrets, and whispers of riches buried deep underground. And now, after all this time, the team digging into the legendary money pit might have just struck gold, literally. But as the drill struck something solid, the crew froze. This was no ordinary treasure. The sun rises over Oak Island, casting golden light over the trees and water. A new day means a new chance to uncover something big. The drilling rig roars to life as the team gets to work. Rick and Marty Lagina, along with their crew, have never been more excited. Today could be the day. They've spent years chasing clues, following old maps, and listening to stories passed down through generations. But this time, the science is backing them up. Not long ago, a team of experts took water samples from the underground shafts. The results? Gold. That's right, traces of real gold floating in the water. And where there's gold in the water, there's gold in the ground. Now they just have to find out exactly where it's coming from. The plan is simple but intense. Drill, sample, analyze. They're punching holes deep into the ground, pulling up core samples, and checking every inch for signs of something man-made. Wood, metal, anything that doesn't belong. Every clue gets them closer to the prize. And today the drill has hit something big. The team gathers around as the core sample is pulled up. It's packed with wood, lots of it. But this isn't just any wood. It looks old, really old. Could this be part of the original treasure chamber? The deeper they go, the more they find. Layer after layer, piece after piece, the evidence is stacking up. Then the metal detector beeps. The energy shifts instantly. Could this be it? Could they finally be touching the very thing so many have died searching for? Meanwhile, in another part of the island, something just as exciting is happening. Near the swamp, a massive stone road has been uncovered. Some think it's a ship's wharf, possibly built by explorers centuries ago. Others believe it could be linked to a secret operation to hide something valuable. The swamp has already given up some amazing finds: wooden barrels, pieces of old ships, even an ancient laid cross that might have connections to the Knights Templar. Every discovery adds a piece to the puzzle, but there are still so many questions left to answer. Back at the money pit, the drilling continues. The rig grinds deeper and deeper into the earth. Then suddenly more wood. But this time it's different. These aren't just scattered planks. This looks like a structure, something built with purpose. The crew leans in. The excitement is electric. They're close, so close. The team knows they can't rush this. Every move has to be calculated. The next step? A full-scale excavation. Huge steel shafts will be driven into the ground, allowing them to dig down safely and see exactly what's buried beneath Oak Island. If the gold is really there, if the treasure that's been whispered about for centuries actually exists, they are on the verge of finding it. For more than 200 years, treasure hunters have tried and failed. They've dug, they've explored, they've risked everything. But this time it feels different. This time the evidence is undeniable. Gold in the water, man-made tunnels, ancient artifacts. All signs are pointing to something big hiding beneath the surface. Is this finally the year the mystery of Oak Island is solved? The answer lies just a few feet below. As the day stretches on, the team doesn't let up. They push forward, determined to see this through. More drilling, more analyzing, more evidence stacking up. Every foot they dig brings new questions and new possibilities. If someone really hid something here centuries ago, they went to great lengths to keep it a secret. The swamp, with its murky waters and shifting ground, continues to be a hotspot of activity. The heavy equipment churns up layers of earth, revealing strange structures beneath. Some of the wood beams pulled from the mud seem to be part of a dock or platform, something built with a clear purpose. Could it be tied to those old theories about hidden ships? The deeper they go, the more intriguing it gets.
Back in the Money Pit area, historian Charles Barkhouse and geologist Terry Matheson are hard at work. They have been closely monitoring the drilling of the borehole DN11.5, now that the drilling has reached the possible treasure zone, which lies between 80 and 120 feet deep below the Earth's surface. Andy, a geoscientist, walks over to the tent that Charles and Terry are setting up to check on them and see how their work is going. Terry lets him know that they are down DN 11.5 and they have reached 78 to 88 feet, getting closer to their goal. As he says this, a loud grinding sound can be heard coming from the drilling crew, and everyone looks up as the screeching only gets louder. The drill operator says that they need to pull up the drill because they broke through something. They decide to take a measurement on the pipe to figure out what happened. As the drill operator reads a measuring tape, he reads that they are open 1.5 feet. Terry looks on from the tent, jaw dropped, worried that something has gone terribly for the crew. The drill operator makes his way to Terry and tells him what happened. He claims to have broken through something when he reached 90 feet underground. Terry rephrases what he said, and now the situation can be understood as the drill operator having an open space 90 feet below grade, meaning there is a void down there. The three men in the tent let the operator know that they are going to talk over this development, and they will let him know what to do once they reach a consensus. But for now, they want to pause the drilling. Charles takes out his phone to contact the Legina brothers, Rick and Marty. Rick is shown in a confessional saying that whenever he gets a call from the Money Pit drill program, it is an exciting moment for him because the DN 11.5 is within the treasure zone they have designated. The importance of the area cannot be stressed enough. They have invested a fortune in time and money to narrow down the area with the highest gold values, the introduction of trapped air, and the voids in the area. Rick drives down to the area right away and is in a great mood. The entire team starts to file into the tent near the borehole, everyone gathering around to hear the latest development. Mike, the operator of the drill, tells them that at around 90 feet he could feel the rods break through something, and it was open about 1.5 feet past his rods. He speculates that whatever he cut through likely fell out into this void. This is an exciting and worrying development. Could he have hit buried treasure that is now dropped into a void? Terry takes out a map of the area, and he determines the DN 11.5 borehole really seems to line up with DN 12.5 and DN 13.5 that is all along an east-west alignment. All of it is a structure at 94 feet below grade. He says that Mike, hitting it at below 90 feet, suggests that they are at the top of the tunnel. Because the team has recently encountered a believed tunnel at the same depth in two other nearby boreholes which all line up with the garden shaft, could they be right that they have intercepted another section of the structure? And could this be related to the large amount of gold that was detected within the baby blob? Marty says that they need to confirm whether it is a tunnel or not, and the only way to do that is to pull the core. Marty commands Mike to get them some core and to find them their treasure. The drill operators, Mike and Colton, march back to fulfill his wishes. Rick is left thinking about how every time a bit goes down, every time they encounter a void, the first thought he has is that it may lead them somewhere. At this point, this is the type of thinking that has led to the team finding clue after scattered clue as they try to trace the location of the fabled treasure. Mike lowers the drill into the borehole as Rick goes over his deep wish to find answers and that treasure that has become his obsession. Rick observes Colton filling a core sample, which Terry and Charles will then slice and dice for some clues. Rick is watching the operations with a desperate hope in his heart that is only growing. He says that if they were to encounter a tunnel in close proximity to the garden shaft, or even if they came across the tunnel at the base of the garden shaft, it would be a true revelation for the team. They observe as Mike and Colton bring them the latest core samplings. This could be the moment everything changes for them, finding out what is waiting for them at 98.5 half feet below where they are standing. He lets them know that the void ended at 97 feet. As the team hurriedly cuts into the core, they immediately notice that they have some wood. This triggers quite a bit of interest in everyone. There are solid chunks of wood all through the center of the core. What could this wood come from? The idea of a wooden chest being used to store valuables would not be far-fetched, as earlier in this episode they found a handmade wooden ladder that has lasted for decades, if not over a century, for someone to come across it. The geologist decides to take a sample of the wood immediately, and he places it into a Ziploc bag to send to the lab right away. Terry is interested in learning if there are any metals in the wood. Later that afternoon, at the Oak Island Interpretive Center, they received the tests back on the wood sample they found in the core from the DN 11.5 borehole. Rick and Craig Tester joined Lade Niven to speak with a young woman named Emma Culligan, who is an archaeometallurgist. This may be the most anticipated scientific report in the history of the show. The XRF results of the wood sample will tell them what is inside their apparent tunnel. 24 hours have passed since they retrieved this sample from their theorized tunnel system 90 feet below ground. A tunnel that they wonder whether it is man-made or naturally recurring, and that they wish to know whether it contains another clue for their long-awaited treasure. The wood sample was first dried out and then scanned by Emma Culligan using the X-ray fluorescence spectrometer, or XRF for short. This device is incredibly useful, as it uses gamma rays to detect any added elements or metals that can be found on or within their samples. Emma tells them that she is seeing some very minuscule quantities of something. However, she warns them that the quantity is so small that she has had to double-check her results multiple times. Not very reassuring for her to say, but honest nonetheless. As she brings up the results, all charted on an unfamiliar-looking software program, she explains that the levels and materials they are seeing in the graph are all expected materials that are found on Oak Island. She explains that all the typical and expected elements like iron, magnesium, titanium, calcium, potassium, and aluminum are all very commonplace. However, she says that there are some unexpected quantities of gold. These words light a flame into all the men's eyes. They ask her more questions about this. Is gold truly an outlier when testing things like wood? She confirms that yes, it is unusual, and she laughs and calls it a very big outlier. They all take this for remarkable news. A close-up of the chart shows that gold is present as the 12th element on the chart of 14, all of which are ordered in descending increments, meaning that gold is nearly the smallest amount present. Rick sees these tests as a confirmation of their theories, and with good reason at that. He says that they now have in their grasp proof that they have singularly unique results from the application of that concept in two different modems, in the wood and in the water. It is an extraordinary development for them, as the crumbs of information they come across has led them to the most likely area that contains gold and treasure has surely been identified. On top of that, Rick realizes that this may connect them to where the treasure may be. This could connect them to a direction they can follow. The results of the wood sample are extremely impactful and influential in keeping up their current narrative of where the treasure is and how it got there. The gold sampling of the water and now the wood is their greatest find of the year. If anyone was waning in hope and enthusiasm, this is surely the thing they need to awaken it inside of them. Their hopes of finding the treasure at the bottom of the garden shaft by drilling is so far paying great dividends, and Rick is thinking that is the start of an evidence trail. In his eyes, every bit of evidence that has led them here are as important as the gold traces they have found. He has a piece of wisdom to share when he says that they will never find samples in the lab. In the lab is where they come up with the answers. They leave Emma with the promise of bringing her more samples. The group might solve secrets that make their deepest hopes come true. Find out about the exciting journey of a group of people who think a strange island holds a lot of money. Not only are they digging, but they are also thinking about how to keep their work secret. Hold on, the story is getting better. A gap found under shaft DN 11.5 gives them ideas. Garden shaft turns into a hub of activity and shows interesting signs outside. Gold sightings and tales about a treasure area have sped up their work. The Legina brothers believe they are almost there with the answers they've been looking for. What do you think? Are they close to the treasure? This coming after the revelation of more gold detected in the water and wood of the island is surely a positive foreshadowing for what is in store for the Oak Island team. We begin the episode with Rick Legina and his son, Alex, walking into an outdoor tent set up, where they have monitors and equipment set up near the money pit. Brandon Vanderhooft of Dumas Contracting Limited is heading up the probe drill supervising this day, and they are watching through a monitor as a crane lowers a drill into the garden shaft, giving them a view of what is going on inside. Members of Dumas Contracting Limited can be seen in the area, preparing machinery and working on getting the probe drilling underway. Today has been highly anticipated, as it marks the beginning of this new probe drilling operation that will search for valuable clues and treasure that are just outside the structure of the garden shaft. The garden shaft was an old, broken-down building that had been built and then left empty decades ago when another group of explorers and treasure hunters came to the island looking for wealth. However, in the present day, it is being refurbished by Dumas, and it has given the Oak Island team high trace evidence of gold through water testing. If that is not enough incentive to continue the restructuring, they have also found evidence of a possible chamber connected to the original money pit, only feet away from their garden shaft. Rick is hoping for something precious and solid in the garden shaft. He has often been the voice of encouragement for the crew, rallying them and lifting their spirits when they begin to doubt they will ever find any treasure or answers after seasons of scratching away at the mystery of the cursed island. Rick is sure that this is where the treasure hunt is truly beginning. All that came before was merely setting the stage and doing the legwork and research for this moment. Alex is recounting to Brandon in the tent that when they were drilling inside the shaft, they hit a void in the area. This information comes as a surprise to Brandon, making one wonder what information the Oak Island crew is sharing and not sharing with their contractors. After this little exchange, we get a flashback where Marty is asking someone how much they think he is missing out of the last 30 feet, and the drill operator speculates he is missing 10 feet. This response makes Marty snap his head to look over at his brother and feeds into his belief that this void they stumbled across could be the indicator of an offset chamber. Earlier this summer, the team drilled into a 10-foot-high void located several feet southwest of the garden shaft, a void that was speculated about by Marty Legina that could hold the money pit treasure vault that has long since been rumored. When the flashback ends, the inside of the garden shaft comes into view. It is difficult to tell what is happening inside, but Brandon, who is above ground with Alex and Rick, lets the viewer know that the team is lining up and getting the probe drill squared away inside the shaft before they begin. Since the Dumas contractors have reached a depth of 55 feet in the reconstruction of the garden shaft, they are now going to manually probe drill multiple boreholes that will be able to reach several feet outside of the structure in the hopes of reaching the void they know is out there and finally determining what is inside of it. Rick says that if there is some connection there, he believes the Dumas team needs to know it as soon as they do. Alex thinks that if luck is on their side, they will finally know the truth today. In order to probe drill from inside the garden shaft, the team from Dumas Contracting is using a powerful hydraulic earth drill, a fancy way of saying a machine that is equipped for penetrating hard clay, sediment, and rock. They are focused on finding the void that is just outside their perceptions. They will drill a total of 3 holes in each of the shaft's walls, which makes for a total of 12 holes they will be making today. Of any evidence they can gather of more man-made works and valuables, the closer the Oak Island team gets to success. The Dumas crew is extremely professional, and as they work, they also collect soil samples. Rick, Alex, and Brandon watch on through a screen when Rick is struck with an important question for Brandon. He asks if when the team cuts through the tight lining along the garden shaft wall, that is the wooden lining along the walls, if he would be able to keep the wood that is coming from every hole the Dumas team makes. What Rick could want with these wooden shavings is easy to guess, but he explains to Brandon, in order not to come off sounding as a very demanding and annoying client. Rick explains that he would like to get the wooden leftovers to send to the lab and run through the XRF, X-ray, fluorescence spectrometer, because they have detected high gold values in the area. In the next scene, Rick explains his thought process that wood would act like a sponge if they test the outside of the shaft, because they know the water samples show traces of gold, so it stands to reason that the wood inside the shaft should also show traces of gold. This is a rather clever move from Rick because this is another way to verify and confirm their suspicions without needing to wait for all the results from the boreholes. He is determined not to waste any opportunity. Charles enters the tent and he is happy to see history being made through the monitor, as there is no way to fit down with the Dumas team in the shaft. In order not to waste a second, Rick starts saying his goodbyes to everyone in the tent, saying he wants to run the water, soil, and wood samples down to Emma Gulligan, the archaeometallurgist who works out of the Oak Island Interpretive Center. The following morning, while the core drilling operation from within the shaft continues in the money pit area, we cut to Rick Legina with forestry technician Peter Romke in Lot 26 with Laird and Peter. They are standing over a pile of rocks, which they have concluded is actually a stone wall. Rick is explaining to Peter and Laird that Peter Romke, hereafter called Romke, has made an interesting observation. After spending a whole morning examining the wall, he has a theory about its construction that he believes could be helpful to them. Romke explains that his expertise is forestry, but he has always been interested in stone and has actually built walls himself, so he feels confident enough to share what caught his attention about their stone wall on Oak Island. He says that one element that stood out to him was the way the outside rocks are structured to lean in on a wall, a classic old-fashioned way of holding a rubble wall together. He found that the smaller rocks that were at the bottom of the wall quite significant, as well as he feels this is an indication of small rocks forming the foundation of the wall. This is the way they built castles and large structures in England and Scotland, he explains. This small detail that could have easily been missed by anyone else is fascinating. Knowing that castles would be built on rubble foundations is not a detail any average person would know. Romke's expertise is coming into play in a beautiful fashion. Romke explains that they would build the foundations on rubble where they excavated below frost, fill it full of coarse gravel, just like the one they are standing over, and then build the castle walls on top. So he finds it rather interesting that the wall seems to be put together in that same fashion. This could be pointing to either the kind of people who had landed on the island centuries ago, what their plans or thinking could have looked like, and perhaps a clue to where the treasure could be. Rick then points to the well feature, which is located only feet away from their rubble wall, another strong clue as to what kind of construction and planning was swirling around the island centuries back. Rick notes that the other wells on the island are constructed differently to this one. A week ago, they had a man named Terry DeVoe, the president of the New England Antiquities Association, over to the island to inspect the rock well for them, where he told them that people have been building wells like this for centuries, even as far back as the 11th century. He observed at the time that the well looks very similar to the one at New Ross. A flashback, going all the way back to 2016, shows Rick observing as a man tested a well in New Ross, which is located 20 miles north of Oak Island, where researchers believe that there was a fortress built by the members of the Knights Templar, who brought sacred treasures and secrets to the New World from Scotland more than 7 centuries ago, and supposedly buried them on Oak Island. This is a shocking connection, adding fuel to the speculation of the Knights Templar having roamed Oak Island all those centuries ago. We return to Lot 26, where Romke, Rick, Peter, and Laird are gathered around the stone wall where they believe the rocks were excavated during the building of a tunnel. Romke thinks the rocks would be an easy way to hide any kind of tunneling activity in the area. The spoils from the tunnel would be moved and cast about the land so as not to attract attention to any one spot. The speculation that they used rubble to start construction on a wall is not so far-fetched when framed in this light. They all agree that the wall was purposefully built. It is simply too well organized and structured for it to be otherwise. Peter, Rick's nephew, comments that it sounds as though Laird needs to find an artifact to back up their new theory. The next morning, following the revelation that the Knights Templar could have been some construction efforts on the island, the Oak Island historian Charles is at the money pit speaking with the drill operations supervisor, Brandon Van Verhooft, asking for an update. Brandon lets him know that they are about to start the last probe drilling effort before they begin reconstructing the next level of the shaft. Brandon watches as the drill twists into the last wall, and he asks a series of questions relating to any findings the Dumas team may have come across in their drilling. Brandon denies they have found anything when suddenly they report that the drill has hit something at 11 feet, and they stop the drill. Charles is sympathetic to the Dumas team because they have no idea what they could have hit, because it could just be a rock, or it could be something completely different. They and the Oak Island team find themselves in the same boat, waiting for answers. They watch as the drill keeps bouncing off of whatever obstruction it has hit with rising tension. A sample is collected from the rock they hit, and they report that no signs of human activity has been found during their exploratory drilling. Disappointing news after such a hot streak this episode. Charles is sure that there is a story at the end of this shaft, and he believes they must simply drill at a lower depth. The next morning, the entire Oak Island team is outside near the money pit under an open-air tent where they have been going through some core samples. From behind them, Emma Culligan, the team's archimetallurgist, comes up with the results of the samples that Rick had collected from the initial borehole drillings. Emma holds up some plastic bags with samples inside them, and she swings them through the air to show everyone. She says that because the piece in the bag is small, she can do a map scan of it. Rick interrupts her and asks what she just laid on the table. This makes Emma smile. In her hurry and nervousness, she forgot to explain what she even had in her hands. She explains that the sample she was starting with was the garden shaft inner lining, that was taken from the wood pieces that originally were placed along the inner walls of the shaft. She explains that from that piece she detected gold, which confirmed the theory that there would be gold in the wood. This is a shocking proof that gives the team's ideas and dreams a lot of weight. The wood that had traces of gold had been taken from a depth of 55 feet inside the garden shaft. Marty asks what degree of accuracy Emma would believe it to be. Emma assures him that the testing on the sample is accurate, and she confirms this 100%. Marty very smugly turns to everyone and says, "Well, there you go." Terry then asks Emma if the gold had adhered to the organic material, in this case the wood, and she says that yes, it did at a percentage of 0.11%. She says that it is very small, but still enough to qualify as having gold traces. Everyone can recognize that this is a huge sign. Marty wonders if that is a big number, and Emma says that it actually is a big amount since she is measuring it, and it is a lot of parts per billion. The experts speak to each other and they float the idea that what they need to be doing next is to keep checking things, like cross-checking the water to other samples to see if they can duplicate this. Terry says that Emma can find gold and that's a valuable superpower, making everyone burst into happy laughter. Marty says that the results are incredible and he is just over the moon. Alex and Emma talk about what a significant find this is, as Marty waxes over how close they could be to the treasure. He believes they have some time to pull all of these separate pieces of information together to create a clear view of what they need to do, a map of sorts. Rick gives a speech about how they as a group have always said that science had to be a strong component of the research and search of the treasure. This analysis is invigorating for the entire team. Rick notes that everyone at the meeting is smiling. He also talks about how they have always said that the garden shaft would provide a unique opportunity if they were smart and humble enough to learn from all the lost opportunities they have had in the past. Rick very kindly initiates a round of applause for Emma, and she bashfully turns away. The team makes a plan to follow the trail of gold they have uncovered in the garden shaft as they dig deeper. They also progress to trying to find out more about the mysteriously connected wells on the island, and possibly get more answers and connections out of it and their history to the island. The name of the episode suggests that they are about to uncover some answers, or, more interestingly, find more questions in their quest of uncovering a hidden well. Marty is heading to the tent they have set up outside the money pit, ready to monitor another day of work in the garden shaft. They feel that they are closer than ever to finding answers, or maybe even their mythical treasure. Paul Troutman, an Oak Island historian, is present in the tent, as is Rodney McIver, part of the Dumas Contracting Limited. The update of the work on the garden shaft is that they are putting in on a new set at 50 to 56 feet below ground. The garden shaft may be collected to the original money pit and may hold the keys to solving the mystery behind the mythical treasure of Oak Island. Marty has a special message for Rodney. He says that when they are drilling the boreholes, his brother Rick was asking for samples from the water, soil, and wood they were getting from the shaft. He explains that when they had them tested, they found trace amounts of gold in all of the samples. In a flashback scene, we see the way they were using a probe drill to penetrate the garden shaft's walls, and Rick asking for the samples to be bagged and saved for the lab, where their archimetallurgist can scan and analyze everything. In another flashback, we see Emma announcing to the team that she has found high trace evidence of gold content from the wood they collected from the walls of the garden shaft. In the present day, the team is back at it, repeating the request for more samples, hoping that the deeper they travel in the garden shaft, that the trace amounts of gold keep appearing, or if they are lucky, that the gold increases. While Dumas Contracting completes the final 8-foot seconds, which they call sets, inside of the garden shaft, down to their goal of 80 feet below ground, the Oak Island crew will continue testing the samples from the original structure. The good thing about needing to refurbish the shaft is that now they have a chance to study the original materials used in the making of the shaft and to pinpoint the ultimate source of the gold. Marty says that he bets no one on the Dumas team would have ever imagined that there would be gold in the wood of the garden shaft's wall. He tells Rodney that he is not sure what to make of their findings and that the team is trying to work it all out. Rodney spots that one of his crew has sealed something in a bag, so he quickly walks over to the shaft's entrance to bring the sample back to Marty. Marty says that if they find gold at the 50-foot depth, then the team will have two alternatives. The source of the gold went deeper, or the gold is actually emanating from the garden shaft and is much closer than they can imagine. Two possibilities that could change their journey considerably. Either way, Marty believes that there could be something like an offset chamber shallower than the team realized, and that would spell greatness for them. When Rodney returns with some fresh samples, straight from the 55-foot shaft, It is 2 huge bricks that had been used in the construction of the garden shaft. Terry the historian comments that they have all those gold areas that are in the water. So that means that there must be some communication somewhere, whether that somewhere is further below, in deep caverns and tunnels that extend out into the money pit, but somewhere there is a contact point. Everyone agrees with that assessment, so they move back to the samples recently corrected. Before Marty leaves to get the bricks tested, he warns that his team will want more, so he should get prepared for that eventuality. While the refurbishment of the garden shaft is crucial to their treasure hunt, they are also after uncovering the secrets of the island, which some would say is the even greater treasure here. Across the island, the team is meeting in the war room, and Rick is explaining the idea that Tom had of developing a new search agenda based on the work of Tom Nolan's father. Tom Nolan is a landowner on Oak Island. Other people in the war room are members of the Oak Island team, like Jack Begley, Charles Barkhouse, and Scott Barlow. The meeting is set to talk about the research conducted by Tom's late father, Fred Nolan. Rick turns the meeting over to Tom, who would know the most about what his father was doing on the island all those years ago. Tom begins his speech explaining that in the early 1980s, his dad began to compose a book of the work he had done on the island. This book was never published, but it gives a good insight into his work over the years he explored the island. From the early 1960s until his death in 2016, Fred Nolan, who was a professional surveyor from Halifax, Nova Scotia, made some of the most significant discoveries of the history of the island's treasure hunt. He focused his work on the 6 lots that he owned. These discoveries that he made include the numerous parts of a large sailing vessel that he found in a triangle-shaped swamp, as well as the megalithic formation of 6 boulders that came to be known as Nolan's Cross, as from an aerial view, one can see that the boulders form a tilted cross. Tom continues his monologue, saying that in the 1970s, they were working around the outer edge of the swamp, and they got into a well. The well had been filled in and buried. Tom recalls the well being around 10 feet deep. But one odd thing about it is that when they reached the bottom of the well, they came across a tremendous amount of broken pottery. To Tom's recollection, it appeared as though someone had taken everything they owned and smashed it into the bottom of the well. At the time, he and his father did not know what to make of this finding, so they filled it back in. He tells the Oak Island crew that it is interesting what they found on Lot 26, so they should take a closer look. Rick is happy to take a look at the well, and Tom wants to know why it was put there, and puts forth that this would be a worthwhile place to put their energies into investigating next. Tom continues recounting another finding of his father's. This thing was found in the early 1990s, and it was something they referred to as the quadrilateral, and it was found using some sort of an offset sightline of the cross. It was within a couple hundred feet from the top of the cross, on the north side of the swamp. Tom claims that when they got into the site, they cleared it off and brought in a small backhoe and did some light excavating in the area. What they found themselves in was some kind of boulder field, and it definitely did not look natural once they started to uncover more. Tom then reaches into a dark spiral notebook that he is sitting on the desk in front of him, and he pulls out what he says is the section in the book that was dedicated to the quadrilateral. Rick is looking over the page, and he asks Tom to explain the diagrams drawn inside. Tom says that they are his father's pictures of how he sketched out the quadrilateral. He showed a picture of the page, which shows on its long side it would be a shape of the formation of boulders, all neatly set next to each other, that is about 32 feet long and runs 10 feet deep, with 3 layers of large boulders. Rick says that this is quite intriguing, and everyone around the table nods along. Tom chimes in that no farmer working on the island would have done this. He makes a good point, as there would be little reason for a hard-working farmer to create such a feature into the side of the island. So it stands to reason to Tom that it has another purpose they are all unaware of. Jack Begley, who until now remains silent, asks whether the area had been dug out or if their team will be able to do any excavations in the area. Tom says that his dad partially backfilled the area so it could be re-excavated. Rick leans forward and starts to take charge of the meeting again, saying that this information is all very interesting and what they will do is explore it further. However, he is more interested in exploring the well that he was referencing. First, Rick's reasoning is that the well is on the northern end of the swamp, and they know the swamp was manipulated. Rick, in a private narration, says that Tom's well is interesting for 2 reasons. One, it is a hidden well. That is how Fred Nolan described it. Rick says that there are other wells on the island, and they are all open and were not filled in. A very strange departure to have one covered up. The quadrilateral is a unique geometric figure, one with possible historical value, and he does want to look into it. However, the well takes priority in his mind. Eager for answers, Rick dismisses the war room meeting and hastens everyone to their tasks. Later that very afternoon, Rick Legina and his son Alex are out with Billy Gerhardt, excavating Lot 11 near the northern edge of the triangle-shaped swamp. Rick gives Billy some important instructions, saying that he would work from the outside in so as not to tear apart the well. Billy takes these directions and carefully goes behind to dig up the area where Tom Nolan claims there is a hidden well. When the first bit of dirt is scooped out, Rick tells Gary that they have a mini treasure for him. Rick tells Gary that, as he knows, Fred did not use a metal detector during his research on the island because he was not a proponent of that, so he thinks they may find something here. Gary Drayton, the metal detection expert, is standing by as Rick determines the extent of the well. Gary is scanning all of the dirt that Billy pulls up. Almost immediately, Gary realizes that he has landed on something odd. He says he was about to sweep over it with his metal detector when he spotted it. What he pulls out of the soil is an old spike. However, this moment is more than just finding an old spike. It also gives some insight into why Fred Nolan was not a proponent for metal detection devices. If Gary had just been using his metal detector to see and examine the area, he might have missed some other item that lacked metals sitting under the soil. This is a potentially important clue. Gary identifies it as a rosehead spike as he holds it up proudly. He is taken immediately by the thought of the last person to ever hold that spike. Rick thinks it might have been the person who dug the well in the first place, for clearly Fred Nolan had missed it in his first search. A rosehead spike is special since it was hand-forged sometime prior to the discovery of the money pit in 1795. If this is so, how could the spike be related to the buried well that was only rediscovered 4 decades ago? More questions spill out, and they had just begun the excavation. It is a massive fastener of a spike, and Gary immediately jumps to them, being used in tunneling or shafts. Gary bags it immediately, and he goes to recheck the dirt he pulled it out of. Rick is unsure of what to make of this discovery and what it could mean. They have found rosehead nails in the money pit in Smith's Cove, and he knows that those areas had been highly manipulated by men that came before him. He finds this fascinating, and he wonders if this is a sign that there are more structures hidden out of sight near this buried well. Gary finds another item immediately and pulls out a hook that looks quite old-fashioned, and he believes could have been used to bring up water from the well, and he notes that it looks hand-forged due to the striation on the tip. Gary then jogs their memories about another hook they found that someone called Carmen, then identified as being from the 1600s. In a flashback, we are taken to Lot 8, which is less than a quarter mile to the west. Gary and Marty found another 17th century bunk hook, a tool specifically designed for lifting heavy cargo. They believe this new hook could be of a similar use and origin. Later on in their journey of excavating the buried well, they have discovered that the boulders in the well are stacked one on top of the other. Rick, seeing more of the well, is convinced that it is related to the well they found in Lot 26, because they are the two on the island that look like that. This is a potentially historic discovery for the team and the island. The stone well was first discovered in the 1970s, and now as it has been unearthed, they believe it could date as far back as the 11th century. The well has shown it has high trace evidence of silver. Rick says that there are enough remnants remaining to point to the construct being the same as that of the Lot 26, well, that he is tentatively connected to the Knights Templar. Rick explains that the smaller stones, the lack of large, round granite boulders, all are identical to what they found in the Lot 26 well. Tom Nolan tells Rick that no matter how much Rick excavates the well, he doubts that they will ever find a perfectly round well here. They are all trying to figure out what to do next, and Gary suggests that they lift the top off the well with the excavator to expose more. Tom thinks that could be a good idea. Tom suggests they take out some of the center and look for more evidence. Rick notes that the 8 other wells across the island are completely different. Tom says that the placement of the hidden well is well chosen since the swamp is not far from the area, so making a well here means they will always have access to water. Rick does not believe in coincidence, so to him, the 2 wells must have been made by the same group for a similar purpose. He just does not know why or how it is relevant. To Rick, this discovery is impactful because the wells being on opposite ends of the island, one in the north and the other in the south, point to a body of work of some mysterious person or organization that Rick believes is treasure depositional work. They want to keep excavating, hoping the very end of the well will show them some clue, but they are warned against going deeper as the team will need to get permits allowing more excavation. The reason for the caution is understandable. as the swamp being so near to the excavating could prove to be an ecological problem for the island. To Rick, seeing things with his own eyes is the best evidence. Tom says that they have found the well, they even found pieces of pottery, and to him this means the entire thing was a success. Back at the Oak Island Interpretive Center, Emma Culligan, the archaeometallurgist, has been able to find some information on the wood they pulled from the garden shaft earlier in the week. The wood comes from 58 feet down, on the crane's side, which would make it the opposite side of the piece of wood that tested positive for gold. This is a very clever strategy, in order to test which end has or does not have gold content, as well as to measure if there is something closer or farther from their initial discovery. Emma Culligan reveals that the wood sample was scanned with an XRF and the metal alloys and elements found in the wood were different from the first sample. She says that the first piece that she brought to them, the one opposite the side of the crane, was reading 0.13% of gold traces, and when she scanned the crane side this week, she found that the counts of gold have only increased as they go deeper into the garden shaft. This is an incredible discovery by any measure. Emma says that there is a fluctuating amount, but it is in general increasing, which is exactly the kind of result they were hoping for. This means that all of their work into refurbishing the shaft has not gone to waste, and that every new set they make is one step closer to uncovering some answers, and maybe even the mythical Oak Island treasure. Rick asks how the values of the 58-foot depth compare with the values of the 55-foot depth, and Emma explains that there are more. The gold trace has increased. This repetition and confirmation from Emma allows Rick to truly absorb the information and begin formulating his theories. He is now more sure than ever that the location they are searching in is completely right. Craig says that they will start comparing the wood to the wells they have drilled and see if there are great variations of gold traces among them and the money pit area. Rick says that highly trained scientists telling him that this appearance of gold is highly unusual makes him believe it is significant. A quadrilateral move suggests that soon the Oak Island team will be making a move to research the quadrilateral formation of stone that Fred Nolan discovered all those decades ago. At the same time, they now know that the deeper they delve into the garden shaft, the more the gold content increases. Rick is sure that there is something at the bottom of each site, and he is determined to unearth these location secrets once and for all. After a discovery in the quadrilateral, they find their journey spinning out into new horizons once more. Craig Tester is out there in the tent, monitoring the drilling operations from Dumas Contracting Limited. Today, the supervisor of the drilling operations is named Paul Coate, another member of the Oak Island team. Operations manager Scott Barlow. Dumas team is at 68 feet below the surface in the shaft. As they work to waterproof each level, they come closer to the full depth of the shaft, which ends at 80 feet. Craig hopes that they find evidence of the gold concentration rising the deeper they go into the shaft. They have many reasons to believe that the garden shaft, carbon dated more than 60 years prior to the discovery of the money pit in 1795, may be the lead to their ultimate discovery. The clues they have collected begin with the water that flooded the shaft, as well as wood samples that were taken at two different depths, 55 and 58 feet of the structure, which had increasing traces of gold. The second clue they are working with is that the garden shaft is located less than 20 feet east of what they have dubbed the treasure zone, where they discovered the highest traces of silver, gold, and other metals, all between the depths of 80 to 120 feet. Within that treasure zone, a tunnel was recently discovered at night. They believe the tunnel is leading almost directly below the garden shaft. Craig asks how deep the Dumas crew is making their probe drill holes, and Paul responds that they are probing 12 feet outside the walls. His plan is to probe each corner about 20 feet. On a piece of paper in front of him, he shows Craig that there are 3 holes per wall, for a total of 12 holes per set. Since they have recently found traces of gold in the old wood of the garden shaft, the Legina brothers and Craig have directed the Dumas contracting team to start a new probe drilling operation at their current depth of 67 feet. Rick says that the area they are in is significantly unknown and under-investigated, meaning they could truly be the first to ever unearth new clues or find new items that they can measure their progress to in comparison to previous attempts at cracking the mystery of Oak Island. To the Oak Island team and the Dumas Company, all of the drilling is meant to further their understanding of the relevance of the garden shaft when it is in terms of treasure recovery. Craig notes that the Dumas team is taking samples of clay and the wood from the shaft. They are excited to see whether the wood on the outside or the inside is what has higher traces of gold, repeats Scott Barlow. Craig says that any new piece of the puzzle will help them out tremendously, hoping to inspire more interest in the Dumas team. Across the island, we have Rick Legina and his team still excavating some wells. Tom Nolan, a landowner on the island and the son of Fred Nolan, is also a part of this ongoing investigation. They are currently on Lot 13, northeast of the swamp. This is the site where they have decided to search for the quadrilateral. Rick found it fascinating that his father had written about 3 layers of multi-ton stone all right there, waiting to be analyzed. A very unique feature that immediately called to the attention of the Oak Island team. Tom is hoping they can get some answers. His father knew they had found something special, but never had the chance to confirm his suspicions or figure out the meaning before his death. In a flashback sequence, we are shown Tom in the war room where he is showing the crew the section in his dad's book that describes the quadrilateral his father had discovered. Fred Nolan was an incredible man who spent 6 decades documenting his search of Oak Island. He found a boulder field that looked man-made. It was over 30 feet long and discovered in the year 1993. It is speculated that it would have taken a great deal of time and energy of the people on the island decades and centuries before. Although Fred managed to remove a number of the boulders and rocks from the quadrilateral feature, he was not able to confirm if the structure was a marker or if maybe it was hiding something. Rick says that the end of Fred's dig is the beginning of his, and the team chuckles as they say that it is time to get bolder. A nice play on words. As Billy resumes his excavation, he uncovers a pipe sticking out of the area, as well as little sticks laying all around the ground. Gary asks Tom whether his father did any drilling in the quadrilateral area, and he says that he did, as documented in his book. As the men get closer and retrieve one of the sticks, they notice that they have been cut and burned. Gary comments that the consistency of the dirt is more akin to that which is found at the bottom of a swamp. As they examine the burned pieces of wood, Gary comments that they remind him of the small pieces of wood they found 2 years ago. Later that day, they all convene in the war room, where they want to go over the research they have obtained from a Portuguese researcher in the Azores, Francisco Nogueira and Yudi, that has been working with him. They see him on their conference call, and we learn that Rick has commissioned a number of researchers across Europe to scour their archives for possible connections to the Oak Island mystery. Due to the recent discoveries on the island, they are focusing on any connections to the Portuguese sect of the Knights Templar, known as the Order of Christ. Rick's friend Judy Rudebush alerted him that Francisco Nogueira has information to share that could prove members of that organization buried treasure on the island. Francisco says that when he saw all the discoveries they made on the island, he tried to find evidence of the Portuguese in the North Atlantic, more specifically in Nova Scotia between the 15th and the 16th centuries. His first task was to review the history of the Azores for evidence of exploration, because it was such an important area for navigators and its location in the North Atlantic. He learned that the Order of Christ was present there in the 15th and 16th century. The belief that the organization moved their treasures to the New World is still believed, and Francisco says the rock wall appeared to be created in the Portuguese style of building rock fences. He explains they would make walls of larger stones with a space between filled with smaller rocks, a technique used in the 15th and 16th century by the Portuguese. The entire room is lit up with excitement. This technique was specifically used by the Portuguese, who we now know had strong ties to the Knights Templar in Portugal called the Order of Christ. Francisco then wants to talk about the missing treasure. He says that during the Portuguese succession in 1580, King Henrique died, and for 3 years the people of Portuguese fought for their independence from Portugal. The fact that the king lacked any children triggered a bitter war, which led his nephew Antonio, prior of Crato, who was a member of the Order of Christ, to be thought of as the rightful heir. However, the King of Spain took control of the throne, and in the wake of the violence, a large fortune of gold, which some believe was connected to the Order of Christ, went missing and has never been accounted for. Francisco believes that the treasure could be on the island somewhere. The presence of the stone road, the stone wall, the quadrilateral feature in Lot 13, and the high traces of gold in the money pit area could all point to this. Rick makes mention to Francisco. After that, they head back to the war room the next day, where they set up a video conference call for an update on the stone wall that the team has been investigating on Lot 26, a wall which researcher Francisco Nogueira believes to be of Portuguese origin and possibly over 500 years old. The meeting is different from any other because of the uniqueness of the wall. A week ago, after excavating the curiously constructed wall, which has what they call a double-skinned wall, because the two larger walls would be standing. Laird explains that when they got the top rocks off at the end of the wall, they did get a good sample of carbon-14. After excavating the wall to the ground level, they were fascinated by the piece of charcoal they found. Rick grows more fascinated by Lot 26 when this happens. He is interested in the construction of the well he found there, with the methodology behind the building of the stone wall, and he is more convinced that the treasure is hidden there. Craig says he has the research on that, and he has the date set from 1464 to 1638 as to the construction of the wall. Rick is stunned by the results, because according to the researcher, the wall date and the researcher, Francisco's idea, both coincide. Now what he wants to know is the purpose of such a wall. Laird explains that those wide walls separate agricultural land from cultivated land under normal circumstances. Jack is sure that this was not done without a specific purpose in mind. Building these walls so far away from the money pit makes little sense unless they were related to the overall treasure hunt. Laird thinks this is a lot of expended effort, and they are not coming across a motivation sufficient enough to explain it. Rick thinks it all happened incrementally, that the work in Lot 26 was planned well in advance. Alex brings up a question pertaining to the dates of the significant expeditions and voyages during the Portuguese age of exploration to his father, which he responds to as being sometime in the 1500s. The historian chimes in that in 1536, the Templars of the Order of the Christ would have had reason to move anything they were safeguarding during that time period because of the Inquisition starting in Portugal in that time period. The wall date would fall right in the middle of those events. They are now more sure than ever that the island has ties to the Portuguese. Too many clues are pointed in that direction. They all decide that the only way of answering their new flood of questions is to go back out and unearth more clues. They are also determined to travel throughout Europe to gather more information that can help them see the locations. Subscribe to the channel if you are enjoying it so far.